Hello, welcome to day 12. It's February 12th, 2018. Happy African History Month. Yesterday we talked about, in honor of and celebration of Nelson Mandela's release from prison after 27 years. It was February 11th, 1990. Yesterday our topic was Nelson Mandela. But I think it would be grossly negligent to talk about the South African struggle against apartheid and not mention our next topic, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela is a powerful woman, and she she exemplifies much of what history tends to ignore and forget, and that's how these even your traditional black male figures, black male historical figures who have struggled against oppression and struggled for justice, their wives, their significant others, who have been such an integral part of the struggle, and Winnie did rose to a level of not just being a support structure. Winnie actually was a boss, a leader within the struggle against apartheid. And remember, Nelson's in jail. Winnie's outside for these 27 years. Those 27 years, she's running things. And she was committed to fighting this the system of apartheid. In fact, she was, in many respects, she remained more militant than Nelson actually was when he got out, and that was evident in some of the things she said and some things she was doing, in that she felt that there needed to be a much harder line held by Black South Africans in their demands and what they were willing to accept. And that's why I think that's just one of the reasons why I think she needs to be thoroughly thoroughly looked at and examined as as a leader in the struggle, because it's interesting that the traditional idea of woman being the softer sex, and her being the one that says no, this is, we need to go harder, this needs to be there needs to be greater demands on our behalf, we need to want more. And I think that's something just really interesting. I think that makes her, in addition to the multitude, the multitudes of acts that she did, she was actually feared by the South African government in many respects, more so than Nelson himself, because they realized she had gotten to a point where she was willing to go to levels that that they did not really want to go to. There were allegations. There have been allegations against her that she actually engaged in extremely in violent behavior. She was accused of, I believe she's actually convicted of kidnapping and having complicity in murders. Some individuals accused her of ordering certain murders, but I think it's clear that from what's undisputed is her hard line, her hard stance, and that throughout throughout Nelson Mandela's incarceration, she continued to put in so much work, and such a significant amount of work in advancing the fight against apartheid. And I think that's something that truly needs to be respected, and truly needs to be examined, remembered, taught, and always. I think what's always critical is that we always examine historical figures as humans, not as gods, not as deities, because we have to realize that people do have shortcomings. So the same thing goes for Nelson. And I think that it's important that we examine these historical activities in terms of what they did right, the strengths the strengths they demonstrated, and the weaknesses that, as humans, we all have, because that's crucial to future fights, and present fights, of realizing, what levels of injustice, what levels of oppression, what levels of persecution can just be so much that can, break a person down. We need to be mindful of this. But I do think that she needs to be definitely looked at and examined further, and given much more credit than I believe she is. I mean, within South Africa, there's no doubt that there is a wide swath of people who admire and respect her. But then there's also backlash for some of the activities she's alleged to have been involved in. But she's a figure that I think we really need to make sure that, like in any Black History curriculum, she needs to be a significant part of the discussion. Just some details about her, that she herself had spent some time in prison. As you know, she was out there, and she was continuing the fight against apartheid, and the authorities were afraid of her, and so they, in fact, she spent in 1969. She spent 18 months in solitary confinement in Pretoria Central Prison, and what she did was she utilized her position to shed light on the fight against apartheid, and to involve outside entities, outside powers, and so that the rest of the world couldn't continue to ignore what was going on. I think it's also critical to remember that at the end of apartheid, so many nations had just turned their back on South Africa and be like, we don't want anything to do with you. But South Africa had a really good friend, a nation that stayed by its side, that was still trying to support its government and its, racist ideology of apartheid, its racist practice of apartheid. And that country was the United States of America. We always, within historical context, we need to remember the facts of who of who fell on what side of history, and not allow the truth of what happened to be swept under the rug. But yeah, I definitely encourage individuals, and she's definitely a figure I will continue to delve deeper into, as I find her to be fascinating, and the strength that she exhibited in continuing the fight, even while Nelson Mandela was in prison, not just waiting for him to come back, and not just some wife like waiting for him to come back, hoping he comes back and telling him to leave it alone. She was leading there. She was out there leading the fight. And when he came home, she was like, come on, let's go get it. She wanted to go even harder. And I think she is an incredible figure in history that definitely needs to be respected for the stance and the fight and the amount of determination she exhibited in fighting against the atrocious system of apartheid. Thank you for joining me today on the 12th day of February, and once again, happy African History Month. I will see you tomorrow.